Hi, kindergarten friends. It's Mrs. Mills here with another book chat for us. This week we are thinking more about spring, and I thought we could read together The Tale of Peter Rabbit. It's a story of a little rabbit who gets himself into a bit of trouble, and we'll see if he learns his lesson by the end of our story. It's The Tale of Peter Rabbit, written by Beatrix Potter and illustrated by Cyndy. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Can you see Peter's ears sticking out of the watering can? I wonder how he ends up in a watering can. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sand bank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down to the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out," she said. Then Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. Do you like blackberries? Have you ever tried them? But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. That's exactly where his mom told him not to go. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. Sounds like he ate way too much. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He was afraid. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether if he had not unfortunately ran into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Do you know what it means to sob? Think about Peter. He was afraid and confused and didn't know where to go. If he was sobbing, could it be that he was crying? He was nervous. But the sparrows, who could the sparrows be? If they flew to him, do you think they are birds? Look at the picture. There's a little sparrow on the shovel and one down on the ground. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter. But Peter wiggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and he rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. Do you recognize this picture from the title page? There's the watering can, and you can see Peter's ears. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath of a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each one. Presently, Peter sneezed. "Kershoo!" Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and he tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting in that can. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. I see some tomatoes. Do you see them? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red ones. The green ones are tomatoes too. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe that's 1, 5. Do you know what 5 plus 5 is? Looks like there could be 10 tomatoes on that plant. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate. Remember, he's trying to get to the gate. But she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more confused. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his watering cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She was very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it was best to go away without speaking at her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Buddy. He went back toward the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter shuddered underneath the bushes. But presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and behind him was the gate. So there's Peter, there's Mr. McGregor, and on the other side is the gate he needs to get to. Peter got down very quietly off of the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go, along a straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the woods outside of the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looking behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost. Sounds like he's gotten into trouble before. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. I like the pictures in this story, the garden and the rabbits and all of the other animals too. I wonder, do you think Peter learned his lesson? His mom told him not to go to Mr. McGregor's garden, and his sisters listened, but Peter didn't. I wonder if he would go there again, or if he learned that it's really a good idea to listen to his mom. She gave him a direction, and he should listen and do what she says because it would keep him safe. Luckily, Peter didn't get into too much trouble, but he was tired and had a bellyache. Happy reading, friends. Happy chatting. I'll see you next week. Have a good day.